There's one of the important concept in Docker is called as volume. So to understand volumes, these are nothing but data volumes. So what exactly is a volume and why is it so useful? Is suppose whenever you have a requirement to share certain things between two containers. Okay, so it's just the same requirement what you said, but little slightly different. So what I'm saying is you have one container with some data and you have another container, and if you want to share some data from this container to other container, because when I say it is a machine, obviously you can share things or share data from one machine to other machine through NFS, that is network file system, or you can try to run a web service and try to connect like that. There are many ways, but here this is not a physical machine, so you cannot do all the network settings what you are doing to a machine inside it. But then if there is a requirement for doing it, and we can use something called as volume. So you can put the data, whatever you have inside a container, into a volume, and then that volume can be accessed by another container. Okay, so that is the main purpose of volumes, to share data between containers. So what exactly is the volume? So volume is actually a directory, okay, within one container, or you can use the same volume across many containers also, so that you can share the data. Now, as I said, volume is just a directory inside your container. Now, you can use this volumes to share between a container even when it is not running. So now say for example, you have container one, okay, and in that container one, you create a volume, a directory, and inside that you put some data. Now, as soon as you do a exit, it will not be running, right? But it doesn't mean that if the container is not running, you cannot take the data from that volume. So you can still take the data from that volume of a container which is not running. Okay, so any change that you do to a volume will be directly inside the container. So since it is running or not running, it doesn't matter. If you do some changes, directly it will be impacted to the directory inside the container. Okay. Now, the other thing what you need to know is when you do some changes to a volume or to that directory, then it will not be included when you try to update an image, whatever that on which you are working. That means, say you have a container and in that you have a volume, and if you are doing some change and you are trying to create an image out of that, then it will not contain all the changes whatever you are doing on the other container from which you have created the basic image out of it. So that is what I mean. So do you get it? You have a container, you have a volume, okay? I put some data into it. Now, if I create an image out of that, then that image will also contain that volume and some data. But if you go and create a new container based on that image, it will also contain that volume. But any changes that you do on the container one's volume will not be reflected in the containers two volume. That is what it means. Okay, so volume is simply a directory inside a container, and you can use it as long as the container is available on your Docker engine. You can go ahead and use. Doesn't matter whether the container is running or not. So now, how exactly you have to specify this volume? So there are two ways through which you can specify. One is when we are creating our or we are building our image, Docker image, we can use the command called volume. Okay, and here you can specify two values. One is the source, the other one is the destination. So what is the source? Source is what is the exact directory on your host machine which you want to refer it to the directory inside container. That means slash opt, say for example in this example, slash opt slash project is the directory in our host machine from where you are running Docker. This will be mapped and it will be created as a new directory called slash data inside the container. Okay, so like that you can create a new volume or a directory inside container, and that is nothing but accessed through slash opt project from your host machine. So this is one way that we can do. And the other way what we can do is, you don't want any specific data to be shared from the host. I just want to create one directory or one volume inside a container so that I can access it outside or from another container. Then the other way of specifying is simply you say docker, and while you are running you can specify -v and what is the directory that you want to create inside the container, so that that can be accessed from other containers. Okay, so the requirement is quite simple. So how do you first, okay, how do you share things between container and your host? Okay, so the requirement is what? You have a container, but how do you share something between the host and the container? So in that case, you need two things to be mapped. That is, first one is what is the directory on your host that should take the data, and what is the directory in your container that should contain it. Okay, that is one. Then the next thing is, if you want to share data between two containers, then you just need to specify what is the what directory that you should have inside a container or the volume in turn, and how can you use that. Okay, so let us see that. Okay, okay, so okay, now here let me take this directory itself. So I'll say slash home user. Um, okay, let me take this directory itself. So let's take slash home user docker. Okay, so the first thing what you have to do is slash home user docker. Okay, so that is one, and then you will say, now I want to create a new directory called data. Okay, okay, so now let us build the image. Docker build -t. Okay, and I'll name the image as August 24 image. Okay. Docker cannot run. What happened? Okay. So now we have a new image called August 24. Now let us Docker run -it -name August 24 01 container. Okay, and for this, let's use the image as August 24 image 01. Okay, now the first thing, if you go inside a directory, you see you have a new folder called data. Usually this will not be present. Now let me show you. Suppose you're using Ubuntu. Okay, so you see here there's no folder called data, whereas you have the folder called data here. Okay, now this is not available, and you can create this directly from the image whatever you are having. Okay, but right now what I'll do is let me okay, now Docker ps, so we have this container stopped, right? So first what I'll do is let me start it. Docker start August 2401 container. Docker attach. Okay, now let me go here, and this place I'll create one file. Okay, so I'll say uh, August 2401 container file. Okay, so that's what we have. Now here, as I said, we created one container called August 2401, and inside that we created one folder called data, which is not just a folder, it is a volume, because volume is the one through which we can share it to another directory, sorry, another volume. Now if you want to get it inside another container, then while creating the container, you need to specify what is the source from where you need to get it. Okay, that is, how can you use it from another container? Now to do that, you have to specify on what is the name of the volume that is going to have the details that you want to share. So that is when you have to say what is the volumes from, and you have to specify the name of the volume from which you want to take it. Say for example here you will say docker run, and there's an option called privilege true. That is because you have to need, or you have to provide the privilege to access the volume which is inside the other container. So when you say you are privileged person, so that is when you need to say privileged equal to 2, because unless you don't say this true, you will not be having access to get into the volume which is inside another container. Okay, so now you will say volumes from and the name of the container, and then you will say what is the new name that if you want to do, or if you have multiple containers that is running and you want to use all the data or all the volumes from that, then you can use it. But default you use volumes from and then standard way of getting it. So now here I created one container, and right now we are inside this second container, but you cannot access this directly. So what you need to do is, when you are creating a container, you need to pass that option, because once you have created the container, it's not straightforward to share the container. So when you are creating a new container, you should be doing it. Now, how to do? So let me create a new container. Okay, Docker run and IT. I'll say this is August 2403 container. Okay. Now, before proceeding further, what is the first thing we need to do? We need to say that it's a privileged option so that you can have the permission to access. So I'll say privileged equal to true. Okay. Okay. Now you have set the privilege equal to true, and then you need to say volumes from and the name of the container from which you have to take the volumes. Okay. And then we'll say volumes from, and what is the name of our container which we created, and that has all the name that you have to specify. Okay, so what is the name of the container? It is August 2401, right? So that we will specify August 2401 container. Okay, now this specifies that we are creating a new container, and that container should access volumes whatever is available from this container. So this is the syntax for accessing the volumes. Then let's go ahead with our standard, wherein this is the new name of our container, for which I need to tell two things, that is what is the image that you want to get and the entry point. So I'm just saying some image here, and this is the entry point. Okay, so now if you see here, you get the data. Okay, and if you go inside data, you can see that this is the file that is present inside this directory. That means just like how you can share the folders or directories between machine, you can create a directory as a volume and then you can share it between containers. So now this directory called data is accessed from both these containers. Okay, now if I create something here, August 2403 container file. Okay, and now you see it is directly affecting, in the sense any changes that you do gets directly reflected into this container. But now, as I said, it is the same directory that has been mounted on both of these containers. Now, even though if one container is down or not running, you can still access the volumes inside the other container. Say now I come out of it. Okay, so literally if you see now, the container that is August 2401 is not running. All right, so we don't have that, only the August 2403 container is running. But still, you can access it. Okay, so that is the concept wherein when you say there is a directory that you want to share between containers, then first in the source you have to create a what? You have to create a directory which is going to act as a volume. Okay, or the reverse, you have to create a volume which is nothing but a directory, and that can be shared from others. And while you are creating a new container, all you have to do is specify what is the name of the container from which volumes has to be taken. So whatever that container you specify, all the volumes that are present can be passed on to this new container. So how do you specify this volume? One is either while you can use the volume using the Docker file, and suppose if you're not using the Docker file, then while creating the container, if you just pass this option -v, and then it will be taking it. Okay, so say let me create another container quickly. Okay, I'm creating a new container. Let me say it is 4. Okay, and for this, I'll say, okay, so now you see you have a new folder called Adam. So one way is you can use the Docker file to create a directory which is going to act as a volume, or while creating the container or running the new container, you can specify it using -v. Okay, so that is one way. Now, what we just now saw is how is that you are sharing a container, I mean, sharing a directory between two containers or sharing a volume between two containers. Now, the same thing as the first example or the requirement I was saying is how do you share a directory or a volume between a host machine and a container? Okay, so that is when while you are creating again this container, you can specify the source and the destination, that is your container's volume. Say, for example, here I'm creating a new container, and here I'm specifying what is the volume that I have to create. And on this, if you see, this is the option that I'm specifying, where the left hand side, whatever that you have, is nothing but the source. Okay, and the right hand side, whatever that you're seeing, is nothing but your destination. That means in a host on which I am running the Docker, there will be a directory called cAdam. Now, this will be mapped or it will be shared inside this container as user data. Okay, so pretty much this is for a Unix. Let us try, because this requires your network settings to be proper, but let us just try this once. Okay, now, okay, as I said, this is the directory that we have. So let us now do docker run -t -name, and I'll say a new container. Okay, and for this we are going to specify -v source from your host and the destination inside your container. Okay, so now we're going to say home user docker, and this I want to map it inside Adam. And again, a double slash here, that represents because since you are interpreting from your host to the directory inside a container, it will first remove the first slash. So you have to negate it by giving double slash. Okay. Okay. And again, since you are trying to share between two separate operating systems because the host has one operating system and the container has another. So here again I'll say privileged equal to true. Okay, and now what is the image that you want to give and the starting point. Okay, so you have Adam here. Let's go to the folder Adam. Okay, there you go. Now I am actually sharing things between our host and the container. So here, now this is where we are, right? Home user Docker. And that is what I have used to map inside the folder called Adam in the container. So now you see whatever that is available on the home user Docker folder on the host machine, that is accessed as a slash Adam inside the container. So now here, if I, whatever I do, okay, the same thing inside the container, it will be reflected. Vice versa. So if you say something here, the same would be reflected onto your host also. Getting it on how do you share a directory between a container or between the host and your container?
Can you? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, someone was asking some question.
Uh, Adam,
Yeah.
and you earlier you said that if a image is created from the other container,
Mm.
the updates cannot be affected. You said, but you're saying that if in your volume if we change something, it is reflecting on other container or other directory in the host machine, right? So what's that differences you have earlier said and differences between this?
Can you come again?
Earlier before starting this volume concept, you said that if image is created from the other one, the updates which are made in this volume cannot be affected on that.
No, no.
Something kind of thing you said.
What that I said is, say now we have a container here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
inside this container you have a volume, correct?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
suppose if say that you are creating a image out of this container,
Yes.
okay?
Okay.
And then if you try to create another container from that image, then it is doesn't mean that this volume, whatever you have, is the same as what you have there. So anything now which you do changes to this volume will not be affected or reflected in the
Yeah.
particular new container that you have created. That is what I meant.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, I got it. And can we have more than one volumes in the same container?
Yes, you can create as many as you want.
So just volume and name. That's it.
Yeah, hyphen E. If you want to do it this way, give one more hyphen V and give whatever directory you want. Or if you're using
Okay.
the Docker file, then in that Docker file, you can use comma separated and create as much as you want.
Okay. Okay.
Getting it on how to share and what is volume?
Yeah.
Okay, now, so sometimes if you see whatever containers that we are running, right, we might need some data from your host for some inspection. So that is when we have a command called docker inspect, and using which you can get all the details of the container, not only the specific machine name, but also the complete network settings, whatever has been available. Okay, so simply now, if you see, this is the container that we are running right here. I didn't, so we have this. So suppose if you want this, or pretty much you want the details of any other container. Okay, so all you have to do is if you say docker inspect, and you can say any container name, and it will be giving you an output in the JSON format. Okay, now this contains all the data about whatever is available or what is the properties of that container. Okay, so it will have details about the machine, its network details, and what resources it is using, and specifically about the mounts, just like a physical machine or a new operating system. What and all properties that you will have for a machine, the same data for your container that you have specified to take will be having. Okay, so all those details, if you can see here, everything will be available from, it'll say what is the command that you're running, the entry command, what image did you use for that, what volumes that you have. Okay, and have you specified any working directory from where you want to run this container, and again all the network related details about what is the IP of this. Okay, now if you want a specific details about, say, I want an IP, I mean the IP address of the container, then you can get it. So let me say this. Okay, here I'll say August 24. Okay, by default, if you see, the containers doesn't have any IP because it is not a separate machine. So now if you need any other data, all you have to say is in the inspect, you specify the format, and inside the bracket, you just give the name of what value that you want to fetch. So here, if you say this is a JSON format, so I'm trying to get the value of network settings, and inside that there is one more sub value called IP address. So that is what we are trying to do. So you can get any specific value out of this. So in the network settings, I'm trying to get the IP address. Okay. Now, it's not only that, as I said, the inspect will give you much more information. You can get the details like whether a system is running or a container is running, and any value that you have here, you can get it. So where it is in a JSON format, this is acting as a parent value, and inside this, all these are child values. So that is why when you are getting something, the first option, if you say, is the dot and the name of the parent, and then followed by dot and whatever is the child value. So here, if you see, there is a value called state. Okay. Now, for example, this is one parent, this is one parent. Like that, we have something called a state. And for that state, it has so many other values. Suppose if you want to get particularly this value, then let's see. So right now, if you say it is saying false, that is because the container is not running. Let us try to bring this and see. Docker start August 2401. Okay, see, it's true. That is because the container is running. Like that, if you have any specific data that you need to be obtained from a container, then you can use the inspect command. And suppose Out of this JSON format, which it gives all the values, you need a specific value, then use the format and you can get it. Okay. Okay. Now, all right. So there's one more thing that is pretty much important in the Docker is this expose, whatever that we are seeing. There's an option called -p or expose. So what exactly this is used for? Now, many times uh, you might be running some application inside your Docker container. Okay. Now, how do you access them is the next question, because now we were seeing from last 4 5 classes that what Docker container is nothing but a replacement for your new operating system. Okay, that is fine. Then rather than creating a new machine, you can create a container and run whatever you want. Now say I have an application which has to be used by other people, and it's a web-based application. So in that case, now rather than creating a new machine, let's say I created a container and I'm running my application from that. So the next question is, how do I access this application which is running inside a container? Because right now, if you just saw some time back, there was no IP address for the container itself, right? Because when you want to connect to a web application, you will give the IP address of where that application is running. Okay, so that if you give the IP address of that machine where the application is running, you will be able to access them. But now here, this container doesn't have a IP at all. So how exactly can you access that application which is running inside the container? So that is when we are going to use this concept called expose. So what does expose do is, now where exactly the container is running? The container is running on our host, right? So what you can do is you can create a port number. Okay, that is, you can create a port number inside a container, and now you can run that application on that specific port. So that is what everyone will do. But now, how will a user access that particular port inside the machine? Because there is no machine as such, or there is no IP address. So for that, what we'll have to do is we will expose that port number inside the container to a different port number on the host. Okay, say for example, you have some application like Jenkins, which is running inside your container, and that is running using a port called 8080. Okay, now what you will do is you will map this, or you will port this 8080 port which is running in the container to a different port number on the host. So what is the advantage of this? So now if anyone who wants to access this port, they will access the port that you have specified on the host, so that that host will redirect the values or whatever that you want to access to the container. So to just now what I'm saying is, say you have a container. Okay, and now where is this container actually? This container is running inside the some machine, correct? Where this is our host. Okay, now if you have some application running, okay, so you have some application that you're running. Okay, now in that application, now you cannot directly access it. That is because here you cannot connect anything directly to this container unless and until you first connect to this machine, and from this machine you have to connect to the container. That is what we were doing, right? But what we can do instead of that is, when you are running this whatever application that you want to run inside the container, say you specify one port. Okay, now once you have specified this port, what you can do is you can map this port inside this container to another port on the host. Okay, now let's say I create another port called 8080 or 8000. Anything is possible. Let me just say 8000. Okay, now what we can do is we can map these two ports. Okay, so now what does this mean is, now since you are mapping the 8080 port of this container to 8000 in host, now this is going to be as a different application running on the host, because this port maps to this port number inside this container. So now if a user wants to access this, all he has to do is access this host, because this host has an IP address, right? So now when you access this host, and in this host, if you access specifically the 8000, that is, now if you simply say HTTPS and the host name or the IP address of this host name, and here if you say 8000, what this is going to do is, this internally is going to map to what? Your container. That is, in the container, whatever that you're running, it will be mapped. So this is how, if you have an application running inside the container, you can access it outside the host through mapping it. Because if you don't map, then you cannot directly come to this container, because if anyone who has to access the container first come to the host, and through the host you can access. So we are not actually trying to access the container, but access some application running inside it. So in that way, simply what you can do is you can run an application with a port, and you can use that port to map to another port in the host, so that now if you directly access this port in the host, it is always going to map and get to this particular application which is running inside the container on whatever port that you have mapped. Okay, so that is the purpose of mapping or porting the specific details of the application from one machine to another. In our case, container to host or others. So if you want to do that, one way that you can specify the port is using the expose command while you're creating the Docker file. Okay, so that you can do it. Or you can use, while you are running the docker run command, you can use a -p, and this will specify what is the port that you want to map from your container to the host, and from that you can access. Okay, now by default, if you are passing this -p and port, that becomes public. Public means anyone can access it. Okay, and suppose, say you are not specifying a port. Okay, and if you just say -p, then no matter how many ports or applications that you have inside this container, everything can be accessed from host. It is like one short command. So if you want a specific port, then you will say -p, what is the source here and what is the actual one here. And in case if you don't want like this, you have many applications running in the container with different port, then just say -p. So all of them will be directly accessed from the host using the same port number. Okay, so you can do that way also. So let us try to do this quickly. Now, so say for example, I want to install Jenkins. Okay, so rather than me installing Jenkins separately, let us see if we have a container which has Jenkins. Okay, so now here if you see, there are so many images available which will help us to get a container which has Jenkins pre-installed in it. Okay, so now I don't have to spend my time in installing Jenkins separately. It will be automatically obtained for me if I use this particular container, because now this container is going to contain a base image, and top of that Jenkins is pre-installed in it. Okay, so now let us try to use this. So now let us say docker run. Okay, now when I'm running docker, so what is that I'm going to do here? I'm going to say -it. I'm just trying to connect to it, and then what is the name? I'll say August 2405 container. Okay, now here the image what I'm going to use is Jenkins, and I'm going to use bin bash. So right now, since this image is not available in our Docker engine, for the first time it is trying to download or pull it automatically. Name is already in use. You have to rename. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, now we created. Okay, there's nothing running. Okay, now I need to bring it up. Where is it installed? I'm sorry. etc. Hmm, there you have. So it is running this. Okay, so you have Jenkins running inside it. Now, how can I access this outside? No, it is quite not possible. So by default, Jenkins will be running on 8080. So for those who don't know what is Jenkins and all those things, pretty much in the later modules we'll be seeing all those things. But Jenkins is a tool which will be using it for continuous integration purpose. Okay, so don't worry too much about what is Jenkins, where it is running, but I'm just trying to show you. Now, how can I access this? There's no direct way to access, okay, because there is no IP address for this container. So instead, what we can do is, now when I am creating the container, okay, so here we can say -p, and what is the port that you want to map. So now I'm saying take the port of 8080 of the container and map it to the 8080 in your host. Okay, so okay, now you have the running. Now what is the IP address of this machine or the name of the machine? So let us try to connect it. Okay, in Muruga 1.mylabserver.com. Hope it connects. Hmm. Is the name correct? Ah, okay, my bad. Now,
Uh,
so
I think only try HTTP, it will work, I think.
no, it's not that. So now, if you understand, I have imported I got the port from Jenkins to, this container to the host, but here you don't have any application or web services running. So you need to have a web service running. Only then you'll be able to connect to this machine itself. Okay, that is what I was trying to tell. So unless and until you don't have a, a web application running or web server running on this machine, you cannot access them directly, right? So for that, what you need to do is you need to have a web application running, and then if you try to access using which, then you can connect it. So that is one way of doing it. Let us try to see. We had a chef created for that. Chef repo. Okay. We didn't had that. What was that machine? Okay, I think we didn't create. Why don't we do that? Let me try doing it. Okay, let's go back to the chef class. For those, we created a web server, right? Let's try this now. Let's see how it is going to do. Okay, do you have chef? All right. Excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna use this default RB. Okay, let's run this and see. Okay, so quick question to Ravi Akash. How do I run this recipe now to test?
Uh, to what? To run that particular recipe?
Yeah,
Yeah, first we need to upload it, right?
that is fine, but I just want to test it manually.
Yeah, then chef apply is fine.
Oh, it's not connecting. Hmm, this is the one. Okay, we are running the service. Ah, okay. I'm not sure what's the network issue, but let me check and get back to you. But typically, what I did now is we just quickly started. Basically, we installed Apache Tomcat, and I started this Apache Tomcat, and then that is why I was trying to access. So you are able to now access this machine. This is just a test message that I've put. Now the difference here is here, if you say 8080, it should be able to access this particular port 8080. Now internally, if you see, that port is nothing but the one that you're running inside the container. So that is how it should be accessing it. So my gut feeling is either Jenkins is not running or I need to do some setting, but maybe I'll check and let you know next class. But just to give an overview, now whenever you create this, you are running the Jenkins using 8080 port here. Now that you are mapping it to the 8080 port of your host. And now whenever you do this, okay, this host and 8080, this will be redirecting it to this containers 8080, and you will be able to access the Jenkins which is running inside it. So that is what actually you can do using this expose. But at least are you getting the concept? Let me check and get back to you.